Hey guys, with all the hype around high voltage boards and long range boards and fusion cores and all the fancy stuff, I actually want to look at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I want to make a board as cheap as possible. Basically, we want to create a trick board or a board for my wife. She rides 5 miles a month and she doesn't need anything fancy, and I'd rather it be light. And I don't want to spend a lot of money on it. So here is what I did. I picked up a Onewheel Plus locally on OfferUp. I think it was $250, had 79 miles on it, and still in great condition. So that's going to be our starting point. And I picked up, I could even reuse the battery, but I rather do something slightly better. So I have a 15S 1P battery broker using P30B cells, and I bought the cheapest controller I could get, the Spintend UBox Mini or UBox Lite, which is also a 100-volt controller, so a 20S compatible controller. And it's tiny, which means it should be easy to fit it in there. And then the only thing else that I have is I have another spare BMS from an XRV kit, but otherwise you'd have to get a BMS from something like Battery Nexus. I think they sell the 15S compatible BMSs that plug and play straight in, because yeah, I didn't want to mess with custom BMS or battery wiring, and I didn't want to make my own battery. So let's get to it. So it turns out I deleted all my footage that I had from building the board. All in all, what we have in here is $230 for the pint battery with P28B cells. We have $250 for the float box, $120 for the Spintend controller, and then I splurged on the fender from TFL, and I also have a Trail Pro tire on it, and that's basically it. Floatbox makes the perfect housing for reusing the Molex connectors and mounting the UBox Lite in it. So that makes it a lot more convenient, and so that's what we did. But I ran into a major issue with the Spintend controller, because I wanted to reuse the momentary switch from the XR, the Onewheel Plus, but that momentary support is an absolute joke. It is completely done in software. You could do the same thing with a Little Fokker, which also doesn't have support for a momentary button. But basically, they're just feeding one of the GPIO pins out into the power pin, and so that one keeps itself alive. But as soon as the software stops running, it shuts down. And now guess what happens when you update firmware? You can download the whole firmware, but at the end of it, there's this 10-second period where the whole thing resets, and this is the part where everything is frozen and all the code gets copied into the critical section. Well, as that happens, it shuts itself down, meaning it's a guaranteed way to brick your controller. And sure enough, that's what I did, and ended up breaking the controller. Obviously, I don't want that to happen again, because technically the way you're supposed to do it is you're supposed to, when you power it on, you're supposed to hold in that button, or you connect a latching switch, but you can hold the button while you update, and then it'll work. But yeah, because I will obviously forget to do that next time, I added a little mechanism in the firmware that disables firmware downloads if it detects a momentary button. So if you forget to hold in the button on startup, then it will not even let you try loading firmware. So that makes it a lot safer, and that way this won't happen again. But I'm still extremely pissed at Spintend for allowing this to happen.
So fixing this was actually quite the ordeal, because you have to take this lid off, which is not a big deal, of course. But then these tiny little pins, I had to have my son solder on one of these things too. That was, I don't think I would have been able to do that myself. It's a 1.25 millimeter hole distance, so it's tiny. Now it finally flashed firmware with the ST Link, and now I'm going to close it up.
Quick look at the underside of the controller box. The bumper will cover this, but the key area going towards the tire is protected by a metal shield. The UBox Lite seems like a great controller for low-cost builds. We have been using it in Nick's boat for a while now, and it does have a built-in IMU, so it seems like a great controller for trick boards and basically entry-level VESC boards. Now I do need to admit, I did not pay for the float box. It was given to me, but it does seem like a great alternative if you don't have the DIY skills to turn the stock box into something you can use for one of the available controllers. Plus that aluminum lid makes it really great for soft foot pads.
It is super thick, zero flex, which means you can use it directly with a soft foot pad without any additional layer underneath, and also 12 screws, and you take it off and you can access your UBox, which is especially convenient if you're an idiot like me and you update firmware without dealing with that stupid button hack.
But after this experience, I really have to admit that I now appreciate the Floatwheel XRV kit a lot more. $470 seems expensive when compared to a $120 Spintend controller, but gotta keep in mind, in there you have everything you need. It's plug and play. You don't need a different box. You don't need any of the connectors. We had to pry them off the old controller and then solder on wires and so on. And also you do happen to get lights that work out of the box flawlessly. So that's a huge advantage to some people. And yeah, all in all, you don't really save all that much by going a different route. I really got to give Tony kudos for that XRV kit. It's really well put together. Okay, now back to the UBox and the momentary button. So for this board that I have here now, I modified the firmware in several ways. One, I of course added pin locking so nobody else can modify my board. Then bricking due to firmware updates is very unlikely now. I also have the alarm feature in there, and when pressing the power button, it gets recognized. When the board is armed and you press the power button, it will immediately start going crazy. And also if you press and hold the power button, nothing happens. It's impossible to turn that board off when it's armed. But yeah, I really dislike the default behavior of the power button, and I hope that Spintend will eventually fix that in their code. Now, did I mention that this controller randomly would shut off on me? Yeah, with the 6.05 firmware, the controller just out of the blue will shut down. I also installed the 6.06 firmware, same exact thing, And so I ended up having to just completely disable looking at the button. So you can no longer use the power button on this board to turn it off. Which is okay with me. I have another board that does the same thing. And I always just use the app to turn it off, or I let it auto shut down on its own. Anyway, I will end it here. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.